Welcome to today's MOOC lecture session. We are going to talk about an important issue today, which is identity and culture, concept, evolution, and different perspectives. We'll start with a brief background on the issue. Identity and culture are highly contested and nebulous concepts. And until late 1980s, the discipline of international relations did not pay much attention to factors concerning identity and culture. However, in the late 1980s, the study of international relations started to pay much more attention to issues relating to identity and culture, primarily because of the emergence of several important and influential theoretical perspectives which showed the important role of human identity and human culture in our life. This opened up new horizons in the study of politics and international relations. We will look at all of these important theoretical approaches one by one. We'll start with postmodernism. Now, postmodernism as a theoretical approach is most famously associated with French political thinker Michel Foucault. The significance of postmodernism as an approach lies in the fact that postmodernism enables us to see beyond political and economic domination and draws our attention to the important and rather complex dynamics of cultural domination. Now, postmodernism makes several key arguments. First of all, it argues that there is no objective truth. There are only competing perspectives. Therefore, what we call knowledge is not truth, but is only a perspective. And postmodernism highlights the important role of discourse in human life. It argues that knowledge operates not only through laws, but knowledge also operates through cultural norms and discourse. Discourse is a key idea in postmodernism. Discourse is basically a structured set of meanings which, conditioned by knowledge, constitute conditioned by power, constitute knowledge and engender social practices. This gives rise to some kind of a disciplinary society, because discourse tells us what is normal and what is not normal, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, thereby causing us to discipline ourselves without the coercion of any external agent. This gives rise to a disciplinary society where human beings self-discipline themselves by adhering to the dominant discourse. Now, postmodernism offers a very unique analysis of power. Since power operates through discourses, therefore it is everywhere. It is a pervasive entity, and therefore it is not concentrated in a monolithic institution like the state. Therefore, power functions like a dispersed and diffused capillary network. It is a web-like formation. Next, we are going to discuss another important approach, which is post-colonialism. Now, the significance of post-colonialism lies in the fact that post-colonialism enables us to see colonialism not only as a fact of political and economic domination, but also as a force of cultural domination, and which has lasted beyond the formal political decolonization process, which was initiated in 1950s and 1960s across the globe. Therefore, post-colonialism stands for a discursive situation where the cultural discourse and the cultural norms of the former colonial powers has left a lasting and enduring impact on the psychological and the cultural consciousness of the colonial subjects. Edward Said's very influential book, Orientalism, Western Concepts of the Orient, which was first published in 1978, is considered to be a key text of post-colonialism because it contains all the major arguments which the theorists of post-colonialism make. Now, Edward Said in his book Orientalism shows how Western knowledge about the Orient or the colonial subjects is linked with Western power over the Orient. And in order to argue this, he makes several key points. The basic point which, the basic and the fundamental point which Edward Said makes is that Orientalism or the academic study of the Orient is a discourse in the Foucaultian sense of the term. The Orientalism or the academic study of the Orient has constructed a particular and dominant image of the Orient or the colonial world. Both West as an idea and Orient as an idea are cultural constructions, and both are dependent on each other, because the West defines itself by defining the Orient as its contrasting image or the other, and in representing the Orient as an other of the West, perpetually negative stereotypes about the colonial, about the Orient or the colonial world is produced in a systematic fashion, which aids the perpetuation of the Western cultural hegemony. This has resulted in a scenario today where the colonial subjects have internalized a sense of inferiority, and they have adopted the Western cultural models as their aspirational ideals. As a result, while colonialism as a political phenomenon has ended, but the cultural domination of the former colonial power hasn't ended, therefore decolonization of mind hasn't taken place. Now we'll go to the next approach, which is constructivism. The study of cultural perspectives in international relations is basically associated with constructivism, despite its many advocates. Alexander Wendt is considered to be the most famous and the most influential advocate of constructivism. Now, what is the significance of this theory of constructivism? Now, constructivism's significance lies in the fact that constructivism challenges the dominant way of understanding international relations. The traditional theories of international relations, they understand and analyze the behavior of the states in terms of material factors like power and national interest. And therefore, they do not give much importance to the role of culture, identity, and norms. Constructivism exposes the intellectual flaw of the traditional approaches to international relations, and constructivism highlights the crucial role of cultural norms and identity in the study of international relations. Now, what is the basic argument which constructivists make? Constructivism makes the basic argument that shared ideas, beliefs, and values, they have structural characteristics, and they therefore shape and influence social and political behavior. Material resources are important, but material resources only acquire meaning for human actions through the structure of the shared knowledge in which they are embedded. We can provide two examples to make sense of how the constructivism look at international relations. Now, Canada and Cuba, these two countries are both neighbors of United States. But Canada has a very good relations with the United States, while Cuba has a very troublesome relations with the United States. Now, simple balance of military power cannot explain this. But we can explain this if we take into account the ideas, beliefs, and the ideologies of both these states. If we look at the commonalities and the difference in the ideas and the ideologies of these states, we'll be able to understand why Cuba is a sworn enemy of United States and why Canada is a friend of the United States, despite the fact that both are neighbors of United States, as well as both are middle-ranking powers in international relations. We can also provide another example. Now, 500 nuclear warheads of United Kingdom are not a threat to United States, but 5 nuclear warheads of North Korea are a threat to the United States. This shows that nuclear warheads per se do not matter. What matter is the ideology, the beliefs, and the ideas of the actors who possess those nuclear weapons. Therefore, ideas, beliefs, values, norms are important factors if we have to understand global relations and international power dynamics. The next perspective which we are going to deal with is an idea which we call clash of civilization. Now, clash of civilization today is a very influential perspective. This idea was first propounded by American political scientist Samuel P. Huntington. Huntington first analyzed this idea in an article published in Foreign Affairs, and thereafter he elaborated this idea in his book, The Clash of Civilization and the Remaking of the World Order. Now, in this book, Huntington makes several provocative arguments. The basic argument which Huntington makes in this book is that in the post-Cold War era, the major conflicts of world politics will be cultural and civilizational in nature, and they will not be ideological and strategic. And he defines civilization mainly through the prism of religion, and he also takes into account other identity-centric factors like history and language. But primarily he defines civilization in terms of religion. And Huntington identifies 8 major civilizations in the modern era. They are Western, Confucian, which is represented by the Chinese civilization, then Japanese, Islamic, Hindu, Slavic Orthodox civilization, which is represented by Russia, and then Latin American and African. So he basically divides the entire world into 8 major civilizations. And he says that as a result of globalization, the contact between people belonging to different civilizations has increased. And because of this increasing interaction and contact between people belonging to different civilizations, the civilizational consciousness of the people is going to increase. And this will result in increasing awareness about the fundamental differences which exist between different civilizations. And this will obviously lead to conflict among civilizations. And because of the rise in the civilizational awareness, nation and ideology as source of loyalty, as source of identity will decline. And because of the end of Cold War, ideology no longer remains that important, according to Huntington. And because of civilizational awareness, which will increase further, nation as a source of identity and loyalty will also diminish in significance. And in such a scenario, civilizational identity based on religion will step in to fill this void. And Huntington predicts that the primary fault line of world politics is going to be the clash between the Western civilization and the non-Western civilization, and he particularly points out the acute potential for civilizational conflict along the fault lines of Islamic world and the non-Islamic world. And the 9/11 attack and the resultant war on terror are considered by many to be a vindication of Huntington's class of civilizational thesis. On the other hand, many scholars have also criticized Huntington for a selective analysis and also for portraying a biased and dehumanized picture of Islamic civilization. Next, we'll go to the last part of our discussion, which is concluding observation. Identity and culture are key issues in social science. Political scientists, anthropologists, historians have understood and analyzed identity and culture in different ways. So there is no one way in which we can conceptualize identity and culture. But there are two particular aspects of identity and culture which assume a great deal of importance today in studies relating to politics, history, as well as anthropology. Identity has been conceptualized in terms of two key categories of authenticity and recognition. Authenticity means to be authentic to the cultural traditions to which we belong and in which we are embedded. Similarly, recognition is also considered to be a key aspect of identity. Charles Taylor, in a very influential essay, has given us the framework to understand identity through recognition. He argues that we develop our identities in dialogue with others. And since identities are formed dialogically, therefore, lack of recognition from others results in a great deal of disrespect or lack of recognition. And it is this lack of recognition which motivates people to mobilize on the basis of identity, or in other words, lack of recognition for traditions, culture, and identity motivates people belonging to oppressed identities to mobilize on the basis of their identities which are degraded and oppressed. Now, all of these dimensions, or rather all of these very complex and nuanced dimensions regarding identity and culture have engaged the attention of social scientists, but international relations as a discipline hasn't engaged in a serious fashion with these cultural questions until the late 1980s. The reason for the neglect of identity issues in international relations lies in two factors. One is the materialistic dimension of international relations theory, and the other is the rationalistic dimensions of international relations theory. Now we have to understand what are these materialistic and rationalistic dimensions of international relations theory. The traditional theories of international relations, particularly realism and neorealism, which are the dominant frameworks to understand international relations, are materialistic because they believe that the material structure of power distribution, such as the economic capabilities of states and the military might of the states, they actually determine the behavior of the states. And cultural norms and ideologies and ideas do not play any role in motivating the states to adopt certain actions. Therefore, cultures and the norms are not seen as the key determinants of state behavior. The key determinants of state behavior are seen as the material powers, material resources and material powers such as economic power and military power. Similarly, the traditional theories of international relations are rationalistic. They believe that human beings are rational creatures. Human beings take decision on the basis of a rational calculation of cost and benefits. Therefore, human beings are rational, not only rational, but they are strategic actors. And state is composed of human beings. And since state is composed of human beings, therefore the basic nature of human beings, which is rational and strategic, also gets reflected in the behavior of the states. So therefore, not only human beings are rational and strategic, but states are also rational and strategic, which means effectively the states take actions only on the basis of a cool calculation of strategic interest. Therefore, if you combine materialism and rationalism of the traditional theories of international relations, we'll be able to understand why cultural norms, ideas are not considered important in international relations. So what is therefore the role of ideas and ideologies and values in international relations according to the traditional framework of international relations? They are simply considered as rationalizations or tools to rationalize certain behavior of the states. So realism and neorealism argue that the moral principles cannot be applied to the actions of the state. The states are guided by national interest and national power. Every state tries to maximize its national power so that the state could achieve its national interest. And the state presents its action or justifies its action in terms of several moral principles, but moral principles and moral considerations do not guide the actions of the state. The real motivation for state actions lie in the calculation of national interest and the goal to maximize national power. And one of the reasons for putting so much emphasis on national power is because of the fact that realists, specifically neo-realists, believe that at the international level there is anarchy. Because at the international level there is no single centralized authority to impose order. There is no authority at the international level which has the power of legislation, which has the power of execution of legislation, and also the power of adjudicating disputes. So a national government has all of these powers of legislating, executing, and adjudicating, but all of these powers are powers at the international level are not possessed by any single centralized authority. As a result, there is anarchical system, or there is a prevalence of anarchy at the international level. So every state in such an anarchical situation has to take care of its own survival. This results in a self-help scenario where every state has to help itself and cannot expect help from others in case the state comes under any sort of military attack or challenge. And this leads to a kind of security dilemma. And in order to overcome this security dilemma, every state tries to maximize its own power. Now we'll conclude our discussion, and we'll conclude our discussion by summing up whatever we have discussed so far. So if we look at all of these perspectives, one thing becomes very clear, that this perspective mark a major departure from the traditional way of understanding international relations. They have highlighted the role of culture, norms, and identities. And they have gone beyond the power-centric and security-centric perspectives in international relations. And while accommodating the analysis of culture and identities and norms and ideologies and values in international relations, they have also moved away from a state-centric analysis of international relations. States, no doubt today, remain as principal actors of international relations, but there is now a serious need to also give greater prominence to non-state actors and cultural factors. And it is in this context that these approaches have made a major contribution in the study of global politics.